Hello and welcome to The Platform, a new media forum that focuses on next-generation network solutions in the marketplace. I'm Neal Axelrad, and I'm the CEO of GCS. Today I have with me Hunter Newby, who is the CEO and founder of Allied Fiber.
Thanks, Neal. Thank you.
Nice to see you.
Great
I was
to
going to
see
say Telex. But
yeah. Hey.
So Hunter
Days
and I
gone
go
by.
back a long, long time, but Hunter, as usual, is now taking the world by storm in his newest venture at Allied. So give us, I know you've told the story before, but
Yeah.
I'd like to get it out to the GCS community. So give us a little bit of background on your company.
Sure. Thanks, Neal. Thanks for having me here.
Sure.
Allied Fiber was started out of necessity for new physical air infrastructure in the United States, albeit that's duct in dirt right-of-way through our partner Norfolk Southern Railroad, and fiber, which we treat as real estate. So our dark fiber system, coupled with our carrier-neutral colo facilities, which are spaced every 60 miles along the route, which is a typical regen op-amp distance, we treat all that as real estate. So essentially, we're landlords for physical air infrastructure that can be outsourced to reach economies of scale for all network operator types, whether they be wireless or internet search firms, carriers, rural telcos, subsea carriers, what have you. There's a desperate need for that type of infrastructure here.
So this is a huge undertaking, obviously, right? So where are you guys in the process right now, and what's kind of in the future? What have you built? What are you going to be building? So every 60 miles of co-location facility?
So
wow.
We've got 5 phases, and we're in the first phase now, which is New York to Chicago, through Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and then down to Ashburn, Virginia, which is just shy of about 1,300 route miles. Approximately 99% of that's ducted. We have about 100 miles to go in one piece. And outside of the ducted, we've got a backlog of customer orders that we're finalizing now the details of, which is very important. We get the actual specifications of the fiber type and count and the associated co-location space and power that they require for the different applications in each of these facilities. So with long haul, obviously outside of a metro, you need to regenerate the light signal. And typically that's every 60 miles, 100 kilometers. Our spacing is relatively industry standard, but we don't use those facilities simply for optical amplification. They're also meet-me rooms. So it's the first time that there's ever been a carrier-neutral infrastructure like this built where it actually encourages local network operators, rural networks, wireless, cable companies, hospitals, universities, businesses, whatever, to also locate transport equipment in the same regen colo as the long-haul networks. So that creates the interconnection capability. So we're finalizing those MSAs now. We just announced, actually, just before Thanksgiving, so a couple weeks ago, our senior lenders. So the debt financing is in place. That's from Falcon Investments and Abry Partners. And we're going to set a closing date once we get all of the initial customer contracts, particularly the co-build orders, which are the really large count orders. So we have several that are 24, 36, 48. We have a 72, and we have a 96 count fiber cable order, New York to Ashburn. Some of them are system-wide, some of them are regional, and that all impacts the size of the cable that we actually order.
So you guys seeing, on some of the larger fiber guys, is that more wireless backhaul? Because you named a bunch of segments.
It's everything.
Right? It's everything.
It's everything, Neal.
Right.
Yeah,
So
wireless backhaul is having a significant impact. But what I've learned in dealing with the tower companies don't own and operate their own dark fiber networks. The mobile operators clearly don't, and they're looking for transport from someone that will sell it to them. But typically the transport providers don't also own this massive fiber system. So we provide an artery that they can all use as a main thoroughfare, and then they can build laterals to touch a lot of these towers. So it's a massive network planning undertaking that's happening now across multiple levels. Transport providers, the mobile operators themselves, the tower companies, just for wireless backhaul.
Right.
And triangulating all of that back into the Allied Fiber route, it isn't just figuring out one lateral for a couple miles. This is thousands of cell sites across 1,300 miles.
Right, so huge undertaking,
Yeah.
right? And not only that, you're going up against the big dogs, right? So what kind of challenges have you seen? How are you overcoming that? Obviously, getting the financial backing is number one, but the logistics of what you're doing is monumental, astronomical. So are you building up a huge infrastructure of resources? How are you going to mitigate the mistakes that were made in the past by the guys who have duct in the ground, but for whatever reason, they're just not able to utilize that duct effectively?
Well, you actually said a lot of different
I did.
things there. There are challenges, there are timing issues, there are logistics to deal with. But I think overarching the whole thing is that Allied Fiber is not a carrier. We're in the real estate business. And that's the distinction between what we're doing today and what was never done before.
Right.
We have a multi-duct system, which is a different physical design, and that's one of the ways that we overcome challenges because some of the legacy systems are basically a single cable for long haul. They didn't have the concept of a short haul cable because 10 years, 15 years ago, there was no wireless backhaul requirement, there was no rural broadband, and there certainly wasn't any data center requirement like there is today where the data centers want to move to where power is abundant and inexpensive. And those are all physical things that the networks that are there today can't provide for. The other issue really is the fact that those other networks that were built in those days were carrier networks, and they didn't provide for neutral colo facilities. I mean, a carrier's own regen facility is for them.
Sure.
It's not a neutral, open marketplace. As we recall from our days
Absolutely.
at Telex, and you were there when it all started.
Yep.
You used to come and sit in the little room on the 23rd floor. We had a little conference room table and a concept. And our biggest challenge then, by the way, Neal, in the early or late 90s with Telex, is the same challenge as with Allied Fiber, but we've really overcome it in the past 18 months. And that is just an ignorance. It's a lack of comprehension of what the physical layer interconnection business model is and can be. And you mentioned we're going up against the big dogs. We're not. No one's in the space that we're in. It's a void. No one does what we're doing in the same way that no one did what Telex was doing in the late 90s. We became a physical, neutral, open interconnect point in 60 Hudson Street. Were there other carriers there? Sure. Did they have their own suites and rooms? Absolutely. Did anybody do exactly what Telex did? No. No one was that neutral Switzerland for interconnection. That's what Allied Fiber represents
So
today.
the neutral portion, you'd say, that's your number one
Yep.
differentiator, right? Or is it the short haul versus the long haul?
It's
Where
a
is it?
combination of the
Right.
physical design and the neutral model and treating the whole asset as real estate.
So what about the provisioning end? Right.
Yeah,
So I'm always.
that's
I mean,
challenging.
that's really where the rubber meets the road.
Clearly.
For me, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously everything is a huge undertaking, but now you can have customers in. They're not all going to want giant strands, and you're dealing with a large market segment from the smallest.
Yep.
To the largest. How are you going to handle that?
There's actually, fortunately, management systems, databases that exist for fiber management to the port on the patch panel, which, from my days at Telex, we created that in an empty
Right.
room. Those systems didn't exist in the late 90s, and they exist today. We implement that sort of at the base, and then we manage facilities, and I mean facilities in a co-location sense, shipping, receiving, coming and going, security, that sort of access, perimeter access, physical access. And we already do have a lot of small customers that are just going to be tenants in a colo for the purposes of cross-connecting to multiple networks. But it just happens to be in a county in the middle of PA or Ohio or
Right.
somewhere where today they have nothing, zero. The closest thing to them is 300 miles away, and that's a tier 3 site that doesn't even have 5 providers. Today, that's not so good, and they're paying $300 a meg for transit.
Right.
And now they're going to be able to build 1 or 2 miles into an Allied Fiber colo, set up a switch and a router, and cross-connect it by transit for $10 a meg or whatever. It's going to change their lives.
Right.
We manage those people just as tenants. We lease them a cabinet, we sell them power, and they get cross-connects. And that feeds the transport business and the transit business of the large carriers. For them, it's found money. They're just coming through the site anyway. That would have been like a regen of yesteryear,
Sure.
and to now it's a mini meet me room.
Right. Exactly.
So we manage the same thing the same way. It's just real estate, comings and goings. You pay your bill on the first of the month, you get whatever you want.
So normally this part of the interview I ask, what's next for company XYZ? Clearly, this is the future for you
Yeah.
right now. I mean, you're in
Sure.
the middle of a gargantuan build. What's the time frame for the national rollout? What do you really see? Let's say it's 5 years from today. I know that's an eternity, in telecom, but you're in physical real estate
Yeah.
now. So what does 5 years from now look like for Hunter Newby?
5 years from now. Well, that's great that you put it that way, because if I think back to the origins of Telex, which is now more than 10 years ago, most of the people that were signing 5-year deals back then thought that was an eternity.
Right.
And I lived through 2 of those eternities while I
Sure.
was there. Renegotiating some of those contracts for the second time with those people was like mind-blowing. What we have is a simple model that scales. And we apply it to phase 1, and that's when we get all the big network operators in and the cable companies and everybody else. And then as we roll into successive phases, our phase 2, phase 3, and so on, which are all on our website, and you can see the high-level preliminary maps, the buyers and the demand is already built in. If they needed it in phase 1, they need it in 2 and 3 and 4. Wireless backhaul, data centers, rural networks are everywhere. They're not limited to just the Northeast, for example. So it's more of an implementation of the same, but it gets easier. It gets easier because the main MSA contracts are already done, and they're just service orders, and then the company's easier to finance because we can lever the cash flow from the previous phases. Rather than what we had to do this way was to prove the whole model before we even did it.
So you'll be relaxing in 5 years, is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, well, 5 years out, we hope, if everything continues to go as planned, the majority of the phases would be complete. Now, things can change. The demand is there. We're already getting requests from multiple states across the country, some we don't even have plans for, where they want us to be there. When I say they, I mean all different network operator types, office parks, healthcare, rural networks, whatever. The ones that are within our path, we're accumulating the demand so that we can plan successive segments of the phase and cost justify the build before we ever have to do it. That gets us the cheapest debt, it maintains our equity positions, we don't get diluted, and drives the equity value for the initial shareholders, which is obviously what we want to do.
Hunter Newby, taking the world by storm once again.
Neal.
Thanks a lot for coming to the platform.
Thank you. Good luck. Thanks a lot.